Hey class, welcome back to history. Glad to be jumping back into our book of American Revolution and to be diving into chapter 6. If you haven't watched the previous chapters 1 through 5, please go back and do those. Those help build the foundation and we continue to build on each chapter one after another. Before we get into chapter 6, let's review what we read last time in chapter 5. We talked about what war? The French and Indian War. My camera keeps dying. I don't know why, so I guess can't see me. Sorry, guys. Hopefully you can still follow along, even if you can't see me. I want to get this lesson up for you guys, so we'll just have to go without my camera. Okay, so we learned about the French and Indian War. We learned about how a big player of that was George Washington leading some men. He was trying to tell the other general, Braddock, that he should not go just waltzing through the forest. And it turned to be true because he ended up dying. He was kind of bombarded and attacked by the French. But we did learn about how the new prime minister, William Pitt, wanted to succeed and capture and get the French out of there. And so he sent all the money and resources to do so. The British were able to capture Fort Duquesne and capture Quebec, be able to get control of the rivers to run out the French's resources. And then they were able to get the land away from the French. All right, so that's what that's what we read last time, and now we're going to dive into chapter 6. Our primary focus objectives are to understand the colonial policies Britain made as a result of the French and Indian War. So after the French and Indian War, what were some of the colonial policies Britain made? And then including the Proclamation of 1763. We'll be able to understand the effects of these policies on the American colonies, and then, as always, understand our chapter vocabulary words. And remember, you can get extra credit if you create your own sentence using one of the vocabulary words and submitting it in this lesson on Canvas, lesson 6, in a text entry box. All right, so let's get a little foundation. So after the French and Indian War, Great Britain was in debt and needed to find a way to pay for the French and Indian War now that it was over. Remember, William Pitt did everything he wanted to do to make sure they were successful. Maybe he went a little bit too much over budget, and now they're in debt. So in this chapter, we will learn about the ways Great Britain tried to pay for the war and how those efforts affected the colonists. Great Britain also enacted policies that would lay the groundwork for the conflict with the colonies. So now the colonies are going to start butting heads, getting not so happy with Great Britain. Okay, now let's call attention to the big question. All right, what does that say? What were the reasons why George III would not allow the colonists to move west into the Ohio River Valley? All right, so as we read, let's look for ways, or answers, and reasons why King George III would not allow colonists to move west. Let's begin reading. Follow along with me. This is on the shorter end of lessons, so just stay focused. It'll be about 15 minutes. Pause if you need to. If you have any questions, let me know on Canvas or down below on YouTube for those that are watching in the comment section, okay? Colonists claim new land. What's the point of winning land in a war if you're not allowed to use it? If you win it but you can't use it, doesn't really make sense of why you would have wanted to win it in the first place. Even before the French and Indian War, some colonists had moved onto the lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. So let's scroll. Actually, let's see if there's a picture right here. No, yeah, let's scroll back up right here. So it's talking about how some colonists moved west this way from the Appalachian Mountains. And let's look at this picture. Looks like people working out in the field. The colonists wanted to move onto land in the Ohio River Valley and set up farms. Now that France had given up its claim to the land in the Ohio River Valley and beyond, many colonists looked forward to using the land themselves. The British government saw the matter differently. Many groups of Native Americans lived on that land. Some of them had fought with the British in the war against France. Having just ended one war with France, the British did not want to start a new one with Native Americans. They would surely have one, though, if colonists kept pushing onto Native American lands. So the British didn't want them to keep pushing west because that was Native American lands. Native Americans helped them win the war, and British did not want to start a new war. In fact, one conflict did break out among Native Americans, settlers, and British soldiers. This conflict was called Pontiac's War. During this rebellion, Native Americans in the Great Lakes area tried to drive settlers off their land. Great Britain believed that it would be best to keep colonists away from Native American lands, for now, at least. On a map of North America, the British King George III drew a line running along the Appalachian Mountains from New York all the way south to Georgia. He then issued a proclamation. All right, what is a proclamation? Proclamation is an important official announcement that is usually made to the public. Okay, so that's the definition, and you should be using the definitions from the book. Okay, please do not copy and paste a definition for your vocabulary assignment from the internet or from anywhere else. Please use the definitions from the book. So, until further notice, no more colonists were allowed to settle west of that line. So that was part of the proclamation. The Proclamation of 1763 angered the colonists. They had not fought the French to win land for Native Americans. They expected to keep it for themselves. Now their own king was telling them they couldn't settle there. The king also said that thousands of British soldiers would stay along the frontier to enforce the proclamation. The presence of British soldiers meant colonists couldn't move west of George III's line. So here's a picture, and the caption says, Native Americans did not want the colonists to move onto their land. All right, next section, the quarrel grows, or the fight, the situation between the colonists and the British Empire is raging. Soon the colonists had an even bigger disagreement with Great Britain. This new quarrel also grew from the war from France. Britain spent a lot of money to win the French and Indian War. In fact, it spent more money than the British government really had. The government had borrowed what it needed to pay for the war. Now it had to pay back the borrowed money. It also needed to pay for the soldiers on the North American frontier. Where was this money going to come from? Parliament thought the colonists should pay. Maybe not all the money, but certainly a fair share. The colonists had been helped by Britain's victory over France. They should help pay for it. First, Parliament said colonists needed to start paying the taxes they should have been paying all along. For example, colonists were supposed to pay taxes on certain imported goods. And we've talked about importing, but let's read this definition. To bring goods to one country from another country. So goods that were coming from Great Britain, or maybe goods that were being shipped from U.S. to Britain, they should have been paying taxes on. Instead, they had been smuggling, bringing in the goods secretly to avoid the tax collectors. And a tax collector is a person appointed by the government who is responsible for collecting taxes from citizens. The British government sent more officials to the colonies to make sure the colonists paid their taxes. The officials were especially interested in new taxes on sugar and molasses. Molasses is a thick, dark, sticky syrup made from sugar. Molasses is sometimes used for, syrup, like for pancakes and stuff like that. So maybe some of you guys have had that. These officials could enter and search colonist homes and businesses without the owner's permission. Oh no, remember we learned in chapter 3 about the rights of the colonists? This kind of goes against that right. They could search for smuggled goods or anything else that showed colonists had broken the law. Yep, remember the rights of Englishmen? One of those rights said that government officials could not just search a home or business whenever they felt like it. How could the British government take this right away from its colonists? Parliament found another way to make colonists pay. When the French and Indian War ended, there were thousands of British soldiers in the colonies. The British government wanted to keep them there. To help pay for this, Parliament passed the Quartering Act. The act required colonial governments to supply quarters for the British soldiers. Quarters were places to live, right? So, to help pay for the British soldiers there, they put this pass called the Quartering Act. The soldiers could just go live in one of the colonials' homes. So the colonists did not like the Quartering Act. Why did the British government want to keep soldiers in the colonies? If it was for the colonists' protection, whom were they being protected from? Were the soldiers staying in the colonies to make sure that colonists obeyed British laws, even the unfair ones? Here's a picture. Many colonists did not like having to quarter British soldiers in their home. Have to take care of them. And guys, that is it. Chapter 6. All right, so let's go back to the big question. Okay, what were the reasons why George III would not allow the colonists to move west into the Ohio River? Okay, so what was a big point? There was a big point about the Native Americans, right? He just finished a war and he didn't want to do what? That's a big point. And then remember the Pontiac's rebellion, Pontiac's war. It's another hint and point that you should point out in your answer to your big question. Okay, guys, sorry that my camera went away. I hope it was still easy to follow along. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for working hard. You guys are awesome. I will see you guys in the next lesson. You guys are the best.